Good morning and welcome to Eclectic Radical. I'm Chris Richards, as always, the Eclectic Radical. Rejoining me again is Yuri Smouter, the host of the 1+1 program and my frequent co-conspirator here. We are back on the air after I missed a few days. Sorry about that, folks. Harder and harder to book shows lately, and harder to get views. And I'm working on fighting through it, but I really need everybody's help. If you can like this, subscribe, share this all over the place. Join the Patreon. Anything you can do to help this get looks and visibility and bring some revenue in to keep it paying for itself would really help right now. I know things are tough all over, but they're tough for me too. And I try to work hard to make these shows worth waiting for. And I could really use some help being paid for it right now if y'all could. On that note, Yuri, how have you been doing lately? It's great to have you back.
Well, first off, Chris, thanks for inviting me back. It's always an honor and always a pleasure to come on and talk about all sorts of different topics with you. And well, like you, also struggling and trying to grow an audience and not getting donations, even bare minimum donations. So yeah, I would also just add, folks, please, please, if you can, donate generously to Eclectic Radical, and do, most importantly, share widely, share, very much share widely. Helps all of us in independent media, and your show is definitely one that is worthy of of a large audience. So.
I appreciate that. And folks should really check out Yuri's Substack and YouTube channel as well, 1+1. And I recommend it. He's got good conversations with interesting people on important topics in ways that really matter, in perspectives that really matter right now.
Yes, and that's thanks for that. And then, in fact, that's a pretty good segue to our first topic, which is which is very sad. And last week we sadly we lost a very good comrade in the independent left world. So I just want to say, rest in peace to Leslie. And I didn't know that he actually had quite a huge following. Abby Martin, Ryan Khalek, and I believe Katie Helper as well, all paid tributes to him. And as your audience definitely knows, he was stricken with COVID, and he suffered from long COVID, and he used his own media to not only educate people about how COVID is a very serious thing. It's not just the flu, as COVID minimalists and denialists keep insisting it is. And I don't. Of course, with all the crazy anti-vax stuff, which unfortunately many people on the left also engaged in, Leslie did use his platform to really say to people to, first of all, to take COVID very seriously. Do take the vaccine. It will not cure you, but it'll definitely make sure that you don't die from COVID and have to struggle with long COVID, which
now,
sadly...
I do have to note, we don't know about how much protection from long COVID the vaccine offers. Plenty of people with long COVID were vaccinated when they got their case of COVID. However, not being as likely to die or have as severe symptoms is still good, as long as you're remembering to rest and take care of yourself during the period where you're testing positive, which means you have to be testing. The number one thing that seems to tie cases of long COVID together is people working through feeling sick or living life as normal because they didn't know they were sick.
Interesting.
So there's a very new twist on the idea that fatigue may shorten your life.
And you know that is very interesting.
Now,
You know,
before we get off on that, though, I want to say that Leslie Lee III, yes, he had his struggle session podcast, which was about professional wrestling and comic book superhero stuff, was very widely seen. He had a nice left-wing perspective on a lot of it. He was a vocal critic of WWE monopoly and scandals, trashed the McMahons left and right as they deserve.
Very much so, yeah.
Was a frequent guest on Katie Halper's show when his health allowed. Spoke to people like Abby Martin a lot. He really had a big audience, and he was really close with a lot of people on the left. And was almost like this close. Because remember, when you think of Katie Halper, sure, she's not quite mainstream, but she was working for years with Matt Taibbi, who was mainstream despite everything. And
yes,
so through that connection to Katie Halper, Leslie Lee III was like this close to being mainstream.
Yeah, exactly.
And when he got sick, he really focused on making the facts of how he got sick. His day job, he was a high school teacher.
Interesting.
The reason he was in the position to know so much about many of the scandals of the McMahons was he had been in the wrestling world some as both a jobber and a referee. He couldn't teach anymore after he got long COVID, so he had to try to crowdfund for his show more and more, and might not have been able to rest as much as he would like because you can't work. So you tell yourself you need to podcast more and try to pull something in from that.
Which by the way, that's also a very, very sad thing within itself, because and this also by the way, this also exists in Europe, where we really haven't since the 1980s. We really have not overcome some of the very toxic reactionary politics. One of those being that when you are sick, instead of just allowing your body to heal itself and you get the compassion, no, it has to be, I have to get better within at least 2 weeks' time, 3 months' time, if possible, and just work. And even when people are supposed to be resting, they're actually still working and busting their asses off. And the system, whatever pathetic excuse of a welfare system we still have, really desensitizes you to just to not take care of your health. So much ableism and just so much grotesque stigma of mental health, which is another topic in of itself. It's very much related to a lot of the ableism we have. So even and even in the indie left media world, if you're off of X or social media for like a week or two, I can tell you it's there's like a nosedive into how much people actually like engage with you. So you constantly feel the need to be on social media, even if you're not producing any content and so forth. And then so you're never really just healing, doing the long needed healing that one has to do, and the long needed break that that your mind needs. So you're constantly like busting your ass and so forth.
But now they want to ban social media and make social media the problem instead of the boss, or the lack of public health infrastructure, or the lack of support for staying home and getting healthy while you're sick and not making other people sick at the same time. They would rather people work themselves to death than take time off to get healthy again.
Yes, and it's so weird because on the one hand, I never ever thought I would live to see the day where a corporation like MTV, uh, they had this campaign during one of their reality shows, Siesta Key, talking about how and the campaign was this: mental health is health. Really trying, it's a very good noble campaign in really trying to destigmatize the stigma we have for people with mental health problems and so forth
Yes.
like that. So on the one hand, and with Dimitri Lascaris, when Dimitri Lascaris was running for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada, and the last two elections in Canada, the NDP was talking about having mental health care be part of Canada's public option quasi single payer type of system. And we're even starting to see that in England. There's more voices. I think they could be much louder, but also more voices talking about how mental health care needs to be much more accessible, should be part of the NHS, and so forth. So on the one hand, so that's starting to grow, and so that's starting to grow, which I think is a great thing. But then on the one hand, we still are living in this toxic far right atmosphere where there still is a lot of ableism and stigma when it comes to mental health care. I think Nigel Farage, what did he say one time? I think I can't remember the exact phrasing he said, but he was going on one of his rants. He was talking about how there are too many people who just want to work at home, and there are too many people who don't want to go to work because they have a depression and stuff like that. Really trying to and this is all.
So the work from home stuff is something else that's worth a show of its own.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that during the period where the government pretended to care about COVID and was advising people to stay home, and employers were pretending to care about COVID and helping people work from home, the actual situation for the corporate landlords who own the office buildings was pretty grim.
Exactly.
Not that I in any way support corporate landlords. I think bankrupting corporate landlords who own office buildings is a great reason to make work from home mandatory. But the corporate landlords don't agree, and so much policy gets determined by corporate landlords. Keep in mind, we had a government shutdown that was ended because the airlines called up Chuck Schumer and said we can't have airport closures during the holidays, dude.
And that is, of course, the big scandal, which many people unfortunately don't want to talk about because if we want to talk about ableism,
these same airlines. Before you go on, these same airlines are responsible for the end to COVID-based travel restrictions and COVID-based time off because the airlines were suffering under these travel restrictions. I want to give a shout out to Jamar. Good morning, Jamar. Thanks for joining us. Jamar is the host of Jabari Media here on Twitter. And he's another channel worth checking out right now, and who could use our support in a difficult time if we can afford it.
Yeah, look, and this really goes back to paying tribute to our dear fallen comrade Leslie.
Yes.
Is that look, the real scandal of COVID was it was a serious pandemic, and it's the first time, and this goes to show you how fucking grim the capitalist system is. I believe it was the first time. There are going to be fucking history books written about this, that the huge scandal of COVID was the first time in history where the response to a pandemic was, I don't want to. So the response to a pandemic was, fuck the pandemic. I want to continue life as normal, and I don't give a shit about anybody who's stricken from it.
And people who latched on to this bizarre idea of healthcare freedom are now seeing that RFK Jr. had no interest in healthcare freedom whatsoever. He was only interested in making everybody live the way he wants them to live, and to try to do so by force of law and massive cuts to the public health support system. Such as it is. Remember, this public health support system already failed us because the airlines called Joe Biden and said, get people back to work.
Exactly. And look, and I don't want, and obviously there were problems when it came to lockdowns, and no doubt there were problems when it came to lockdowns, and yes, many people's mental health suffered tremendously because of that.
No,
that being said,
I know that there were.
Wait. That being said, the response to the pandemic should have been the following: a people's bailout, suspension of people's rents, suspension of people's mortgages, and all businesses, big or small, should have been.
I want to strongly dispute the idea.
Should have been bailed out and so forth. And when it comes to the pandemic, we need a single payer healthcare system for anything like that. That's not what happened, though, when it came to...
I want to strongly dispute the idea that lockdowns were bad for people's mental health. COVID, a massive disabling pandemic, important enough that governments were suggesting people stay home and not get sick. That's bad for people's mental health. Staying home because you're scared of getting sick might be bad for someone's mental health, but that's not because of the lockdown. That's because they might get sick and they're scared of it, and they don't want to be scared of it. So they want this sort of return to normal. They don't want to make the changes that they would have to make in order to avoid more of this and to end what's happening now. And if somebody like Leslie complains about it, the response is very Ebenezer Scrooge. Everybody should read Charles Dickens if they haven't, and if they have a problem reading but they can sit through a movie, they should watch one of the many excellent adaptations of A Christmas Carol, because they all pretty much preserve the fundamentals of this exchange. But Scrooge is sitting in the workshop, and the gentlemen from the Conservative Party who are collecting to give to the poor, because this will shock you considering the Conservative Party nowadays, but members of the Conservative Party, under the strict direction and supervision of their leadership, used to go around during Christmas and campaign for donations to various charities that prevented poor people from having to go to workhouses, because, as bizarre as it sounds, the common interests of the landed nobility and the working class meant that the Conservative Party was vaguely anti-capitalist during the Victorian era. And this vague anti-capitalism...
That's that good old one-nation Toryism, compassionate conservatism.
It's a little more than that, because the thing you have to remember about Dickens and his beautiful social commentary is Dickens was a Tory who hated the Liberal Party because he hated these bourgeois capitalist shitbags who were ruining lives. He hated people like Scrooge and Marley who refused to do what he saw as the right Christian thing. And so
Go ahead.
He was with the Conservative Party because the Conservative Party, in ironically, its advocacy for the people being hurt in their pocketbook by the enclosure of the commons, the nobles who had owned the commons before, and the working class people who were suffering because of the enclosure of the commons. The Tories we're taking this bourgeois capitalism thing too fast party.
Well, in fact, I don't remember what show it was. I think it was one that we did with Connor as a co-panelist. But you said a historical fact which shocked me, and then I later was double checking this, and you're right, 100% right on this. But yes, as you mentioned, the Conservative Party, of course, it would shock many people that the Conservative Party had this kind of faction in the Conservative Party called One Nation Tories, the kind of like a batch of conservatives. But it was in fact the Whig Party, the precursor to the Liberal Party of Britain, that actually introduced the poorhouses, the debtor's prison, and stuff like that.
And their thinking behind this goes into the ableism today, because their thinking was steeped, despite the fact that the leaders of the Liberal Party were these secular, entirely non-religious, utilitarian thinkers who were trying to create the happiest society as they saw it. Their morality was extremely Puritan and right-wing in the sense of the work ethic that they appropriated from Protestantism. They went with the Protestant idea that it harms poor people to support them instead of making them work. And so the idea of the workhouse was, well, we can't just give everybody handouts, because then people won't work and they'll just take the handouts, and we'll create a beggar class. Now, let's ignore the fact that they had already created a beggar class by making it impossible for able-bodied adults to get jobs other than as domestic servants, and cursed industrialism with the legacy of children being killed in factories, being forced to do adult work. So the beggar class existed because anybody who didn't have kids that they could send to work had to either beg or resort to crime. Now,
continue. You're on the roll. You're on the roll.
Hating this beggar class and wanting to do something about it, they institute the workhouse, which says, well, if you can't make a living any other way, you can come live here, and we'll take care of all of your basic minimum needs, but we're going to make you grind grain on a treadmill to make it so that we can make your own gruel, because we want to make this suck for you, so you're motivated to go out and have kids and send them to work so they can be exploited and die in the factory, so you don't have to walk the treadmill.
And that's what you just mentioned is probably the most. I think that itself is probably the most ghoulish, the most inhumane of an already inhumane system.
These same liberals
is that people who were unfortunate, mostly working class poor people, who were unfortunate to get caught up in that system, they literally would make people just do fucking meaningless work activity to extol them.
These same liberals invented the modern prison in the name of reforming prisoners by forcing them to do hard labor.
I know, and it's so Yeah, I mean, like I
Not
said,
productive labor.
it's so
That's
gross.
and here's the
It's
thing
so
about
gross.
not even productive labor, but hard labor for the purpose of hard labor itself, because hard labor was believed to make people better. Not even the communist idea of sending the leader of the party back to the assembly line because he's too stuck up as the leader of the party. But again, useless, non-productive work for the purpose of hurting people to make them better people. Because all this pain will make them want to avoid pain and therefore be good in order to take part in the pleasure of society.
Of course, that's where and of course, very Anglo. This is where the whole ghoulish idea of the concentration camp, which of course, the Nazis, took it one step another level. But the first concentration camps was based like that. It's just you're making people do hard labor for fuck all reason.
I hate to give white South Africans any more of a victim complex. But historically, outside of the American reservation system for our indigenous people here, historically, the first victims of concentration camps were the Boers in British South Africa, because they were fighting a war. And the British wanted to keep all the Boer civilians where they could watch them to make sure they weren't fighting the war too, because of problems with guerrillas and all that. And I mean, that's the closest thing there ever actually has been to a Boer genocide, but the British did it, not any black people from Africa.
Yeah. And of course, that's also putting aside the fact that one thing. I mean, if people, you often hear this phrase when people talk about, the Russia, Ukraine war, that it's an inter-imperialist, that's an inter-imperialist war, which I kind of disagree with that, but that's another topic for another day. But if you want to talk about a real inter-imperialist, or should we just say inter-white supremacist war that was going on, that was the Anglo-Boer War, because other people who were victims of British concentration camps, which did get the blessing of the white settler Boer Dutch population, was of course
well the
black indigenous people who were resisting the British and were resisting the Boers.
The Boers,
and they got and not to minimize how awful the prisoners of wars that the Boers were. I don't want to minimize that because it was horrendous, but we tend to also forget that there were plenty of blacks, that were caught up in that very disgusting system.
This is like,
and it's all rooted. The concentration camps, the ableism, the racism, the genocide. That stuff is all rooted in what the Brits did to their own
poor people in the workhouse, and they also had debtors' prison, where if you owed money, you went to prison until your debt was paid. If you had friends who would eventually pay your debt and who would support you while you were in prison, you lived kind of a nice lifestyle despite being in prison. But if you didn't have anybody supporting you while you're in prison, or any sort of money or any prospects of someone else paying your debt, then you worked your debt off in essentially bound servitude. Once again, I can't stress this enough. Once again, absolutely unproductive labor, breaking your back in order to convince you that you needed to pay your debts the next time, or else not borrow money. And the class tension here between the people who are forced to work and the people who are able, through their connections, to be supported while in prison, while people take up a collection to pay their debts, is a very important contradiction that was one of the reasons that socialism seemed like it was going to take root in the UK at the time Karl Marx was there, and is really responsible for all the things that the Labor Party felt it had to do after World War II. But
yeah, no, couldn't have said it better myself.
The Tories are coming to take up a collection, and the Tories say to Mr. Scrooge, this time of the year, we want to take up some money so that the poor of London can enjoy the holiday, blah, 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 blah. And Mr. Scrooge says, well, what does that have to do with me? And so, well, many of them have no place to go and nothing to do. No place to go. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Are the poor law and the treadmill not still in effect? And the Tory says, they are very much in effect, I'm sorry to say. And Scrooge says, well, you had given me some reason to believe that they had been abolished, and I'm much relieved to hear it. My taxes go to pay for these institutions, and those who are poor must go there. And then the Tory gentleman says, but Mr. Scrooge, some cannot go, meaning disabled people, and some would rather die. At which point Ebenezer Scrooge says, if they would rather die, they had better hurry up and do it and reduce the surplus population.
Wow.
Now, it's important to understand that by putting these words, which came from liberal economists and heretical, blasphemous clergymen, and now I'm having trouble remembering his name. I hate it when that happens.
Explain the story. You're having me.
Anyway, so the economist in question. This is a reference to a liberal economist who had theories of population that basically said you need to keep the poor reproducing by making their lives miserable enough that they need kids in order to, but you also need to keep them from living too long after you're done working them.
Whoa, wow. Wow.
And basically the idea under this economist's, and I don't know why I'm blanking on the name, it's so stupid, but this economist was one of the motivations for Marx because his ideas were so completely insane. But they were accepted too. I mean, this is the basic principle by which our rulers are making economic decisions to this day. Thomas Malthus, that's his name. Thomas Malthus, Malthusianism.
Ah, yes, the precursor to, drum roll please, eugenics movement.
Well, I mean, Malthusianism is basically the whole point of eugenics. The social Darwinism combined with Malthusianism gives us eugenics as a social policy. Now, the reason this is important is because it killed Leslie. I don't want to go ahead and depersonalize it or try to talk about strangers or try to step away from what is a personal issue for many people. I mean, obviously I cared before, but on a very personal level, I care about this issue because people I love are sick or dead because of it. Now, too many people seem to not care that we're working people to death. We were working people to death even before COVID.
Exactly.
But COVID has just made the fact that we are literally working people to death even more crystal clear. And you can take this eugenics project from COVID and public health to almost everything else too. When Trump says we're not going to declare war, we're just going to kill them and start blowing up fishing boats in the Caribbean, and according to the most recent news reports, blowing up survivors in the water. Yes, Pete Hegseth was allegedly ordered a second strike against survivors floating in the water, which, if true, is a major, major, major crime against humanity, and he should be dragged off to The Hague right now. Not usually a big fan of criminal cops abusing their power, but if someone could please kidnap and forcibly try Pete Hegseth, I would really appreciate it. I'm looking at you, Interpol.
And throw Sarkozy in there while we're at it. Not to go. Actually, no. That's going to go a little bit off topic, but yeah, I completely agree with what I completely.
But so it's this principle of eugenics, the idea that, because remember, we're tying this all into immigration. The reason we're in a state of war with Venezuela is because they're invading us with criminal gangs, allegedly. Though Tren de Aragua is a gang that doesn't exist anymore, which makes it a kind of a weird choice. It's like the Republicans are always behind the times. They were all whipped up about MS-13 at a point in history where MS-13 was basically a major American ally. They were whipped up. They're whipped up now about Tren de Aragua after it no longer exists. There's all this.
From what Jesus Rodriguez Espinosa, the editor-in-chief of Orinoco Tribune, Venezuelan based in Caracas, who I've interviewed many times, plugs Orinoco Tribune, folks should check them out. But in a very extensive interview, him and the other editor-in-chief, Sahali Chowdhury, gave to me, they also mentioned that even when this gang exists in Venezuela, it was nothing, and I repeat, nothing at all on the level of the fucking Colombian drug cartels. Many of them with ties to far-right paramilitary groups that the U.S. supports, or the Mexican drug cartels.
But even the cartels, because the cartel excuse for the southern border is still based on a drug economy like 20 years old. The major drugs are not coke and heroin coming across the Mexican border anymore. They're not even coke and heroin coming from China anymore, though it should be noted that Asian cocaine usually comes into the U.S. from Hong Kong in shipping companies that are friendly with the U.S. government and not the Chinese government, and not from mainland so-called communist China.
It's such a racket.
Cocaine Mitch's father, who is
rackets, unbelievable.
Cocaine Mitch's father-in-law, who is a Chinese American based in Hong Kong, is sort of the archetype of this. A Chinese American businessman with dual citizenship based in pro-Western Hong Kong, using his American business connections to smuggle drugs into the country. Not because he's a quote-unquote drug boss, but because it's another way to pad his profits at the end of every quarter.
Chris, he sounds like a wonderful person who should get the Nobel Peace Prize, the Sarkov Prize, the Right Livelihood Prize, and whatever fake human rights prize that the European Union gives. The Václav Havel Prize. That's what the wonderful gentleman that you just mentioned should get.
But anyway, so this whole idea of letting people die and reducing the surplus population has been a core of liberal politics ever since the conservative parties turned liberal between World War I and World War II.
Yeah, no, and thinking about Leslie's death and what you were and what that wonderful thing you were talking about when when it comes to COVID, that the issue that the issue isn't really that people are having mental health struggles because of lockdowns. It's we need lockdowns because it's a fucking pandemic. We need to take it seriously. I am an advocate, by the way,
and people
and I was one of those I was one of those few voices in the beginning. In the beginning of
Mhm.
the pandemic, there were a few voices on the left that were advocating for the following: suspension of people's rents, suspension of people's
Mhm.
mortgages, bail bail out the businesses. Although some specifically were only talking about
Universal
small
basic
business.
the thing we were talking about here was universal basic income for everyone, the business
Yeah,
owners and the workers, and
yeah,
not bail out the businesses, but support the owners.
yeah, exactly. And but then very quickly, I don't know how. Very quickly the following happened. Basically, far right reactionary neo eugenics movements started to weaponize some people's legitimate grievances, some people's legitimate concerns, and went full on batshit libertarian.
Well, but
because
let's
because
let's
because
talk
because very
about that.
because the people who were against because the people who were against lockdowns and were against any form of relief to people who were struggling with COVID and so forth like that, we're all using very just very far right ableist nonsense. So you had some people, leftists mind you, who would say a version of well, these people who are dying left, right, and centers, they had pre-existing illnesses, or what's that thing that they use in the pre-existing conditions, or what the
Pre-existing conditions is a reason for denying coverage, you mean? Well,
yeah,
the,
yeah,
the real
exactly,
trouble right
exactly.
now, the real trouble right now is that disability doesn't recognize long COVID as a disability.
Yeah,
Most places.
well, yeah, because in the U.S., with its for-profit, privatized, non-healthcare system, many people who do have insurance, a lot of times those insurance companies screw them over by saying, you have a pre-existing condition.
Now, and
We
this
don't
was
cover that in our insurance plans.
this was
So when it comes to fast forward to COVID, you had
mhm.
people on the left when you would argue with them about many people dying from the pandemic, they would say things like, "Well, he had a pre-existing condition. He was
Mhm.
already overweight. He already had this
Well
illness.
that that
Ergo, that's what kills him, not
that
COVID, which
that
is just
pre
like the flu."
yeah, that pre-existing condition clause in insurance companies before Obamacare really was just, rationing and eugenics on a business accounting sheet level that led to real people dying because they didn't qualify for the disability system and were forced to work despite disabilities, which cuts into this which takes us to this eugenic system whereby people who cannot work are allowed to die or are encouraged to kill themselves in Canada and the Netherlands. And I guess the UK looks like they're going to pass the law and go down that same rabbit hole. We're going to see somebody push for that here too. And I want to note that pushing the government into making it ridiculously easy for people to kill themselves is not just respecting people's right to die. It's encouraging people to die by making it extremely easy to die while still not supporting life.
Fair point.
You are
Very fair.
deliberately giving people negative incentives to stay alive and positive incentives to die. And people say things to coworkers and friends and family Like, well, why don't you just go ask the government to help you kill yourself if things are really so bad?
Wow. Wow.
Disabled people I know in Canada have been subjected directly to this sort of thing. Because Canada actually, you want to pretend that the US is as bad as it gets. For all the faults of the US disability system, disabled people in the US get more money than they do in Canada.
Wow. Wow, that's unbelievable.
I'm pointing that out because I know people in Canada who have had to deal with their disability system and see their disability cuts and see that disability not be increased at a time when more than any other it should be increased. And you see the same thing in the UK where they released ridiculous disability cuts that even quote unquote sensible broadcasters said, oh, these are necessary because of fraud. Same excuse they were trying to use here.
Yeah.
And disability cuts means giving disabled people less money and making it harder for them to live. At the same time, you're talking about legally making it easier for them to die. Again, this is encouraging people to die with negative incentives to live and positive incentives to die.
And we're not exact, and I think we should make this very clear to the to our audience and even the people who might have the knee jerk, the COVID denialists and so forth, who might have the knee jerk response that they're probably going to have but we're not exaggerating when we're actually describing these conditions. I remember I was following Steve Topple, I believe was his name. He was doing lots of journalism for the Canary, which was quite a popular indie left outlet. And he was he was one of the first journalists actually who was covering the impact austerity, welfare cuts, and stuff like that was having on disabled people.
Yes.
He was he was one of the first to cover that. And there's a book I mentioned, I have it over there, called Crippled, which also talks about the horrendous impact that the David Cameron liberal coalition government, Tory liberal government, was having on the disabled community. The disabled community. And for the people who think that that Ken Loach's Daniel Blake is exaggerating, it's not exaggerating. We literally have testimonies, and the UK has actually been brought in international courts. I think even UN courts has been brought twice by the disabled community. Disabled People Against Cuts, I believe, was the name of the organization, which is still in existence. And they found that the UK was basically engaging in gross institutional ableism.
Canada and the UK, both of which are signatory to treaties that the US has never signed, I should note, and where Interpol and the International Criminal Court do have jurisdiction, are both officially by the UN. Their disability systems are found to be like in horrific violation of the UN's minimum requirements for a humane system.
Yeah.
And now we talk about how
this is also another reason why when we talk about the horrendous institutional classism, that people who are unemployed and they need welfare, that's basically the system we have. And I hate the term neoliberalism. I prefer that we all call it neo-Dickensianism. You were the one that brought up Charles Dickens, so I have to.
Well, there's nothing neo about it. It's just capitalism. This is all that what was going on in the Victorian era. When people talk about neoclassical economics or neoliberal political theory, they're talking about a return to the liberal revolution of the Victorian era, where the best friend that the worker had was Benjamin fucking Disraeli, which is the point I will note.
One nation Tory, Chris.
Benjamin Disraeli is the original one nation Tory, who all the other modern one nation Tories or red Tories in Canada pay lip service to. And yet Benjamin fucking Disraeli would slap these people around saying, "You assholes, you've sold out to the capitalists. I was trying to starve until they became respectable landlords again."
And of course, the expression I often, use to describe, horrendous, liberal governments, whether it's Kritzan or Bill Clinton or Tony Blair, I often, and I even include Obama in this. There is such a rush to rehabilitate that awful man's record, and I will fight vigilantly to keep calling him out. But the thing I often describe liberals as is liberals are fascists with better table manners, in a nutshell.
Fascists who look much better in tan suits.
Yes, exactly. But that doesn't, of course, minimize just how awful the policies and the real policies. I'm glad you brought up. A lot of people have been complaining that I haven't been covering Canada for the past couple of months and so forth. So I'm glad that you brought up Canada, because I think, when we, there's been more in the U.S. at least. In the U.S. at least, there's been more critical coverage of how awful the Bill Clinton era was, that neo-Dickensian era. But in Canada, there's not been too much attention, and it really deserves more documentaries and more podcast coverage of just how awful the fucking 1990s were. So the 1980s was, was bad under Brian Mulroney, but I cannot stress this enough. And to invoke, Glenn Ford in this, Glenn Ford used to always say that the Democrats were the more effective evil. That is the Liberal Party in Canada.
Well,
and the 90s austerity budget was horrendous, brutal beyond all imagination.
Justin Trudeau, the liberal son of a democratic socialist Canadian icon who himself sort of disappointed his biggest fans when he became Liberal Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau is like the Bill Clinton of Canada.
Very much so.
And Mark Carney is, and all the weird communist conspiracy websites should do something with this. Mark Carney is literally a central banker. It's like if we made Jerome fucking Powell president of the United States. Can you imagine the U.S. electing a former Fed chair president? That's what's happened in Canada. They've made a central banker prime minister.
Yeah, but I don't want to get into the territory of actually.
But there should be some rules. There should be some rules against central bankers having important positions in government.
Well, interestingly enough, and I don't want to go into the the COVID minimalist reactionary world, because there are some people who were so obsessed with the whole World Economic Forum. This is where all the globalists get together to destroy all of us, and George Soros is a part of it, that cultural Marxist and so forth. But let's go a little bit back there. I mean, Mark Carney, funnily enough, anywho. No, it's all quite darkly fascinating.
Thanks.
Because when he when he was running for the leadership, of the of the Liberal Party, And this is where I knew, be very careful for this guy. It's going to be a world hurt if he becomes prime minister. When he was running for the leadership, both him and Chrystia Friedland, who does have Nazi skeletons in her closet, they both said the following. They both were praising the 90s budgets of Paul Martin under Liberal Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, and they both were hailing that budget, which was a vicious austerity budget. Austerity before austerity before that term was even used. So I knew for a fact, okay, if this guy becomes Prime Minister of Canada, it's going to be a world of hurt for the vast working class. But yeah.
No, I totally understand. I mean, the thing about the reason I bring it up is because central banks drive eugenics in many ways. It was the German bankers who loved Hitler more than anyone else, which was part of the reason he was always attacking foreign banks as opposed to German banks. Talking about British bankers when he was accusing it all of being a Jewish conspiracy, he was naming British Jewish bankers, not German Jewish bankers.
Yes. What's
the Rothschilds?
Exactly.
Which is still a beloved conspiracy theory. Among many on the right, but, and I say but with a tremendous sense of irony, as it turns out, the current youngest Rothschild heiress is very much pro-Palestine.
You gotta be kidding me.
No, I'm not.
That's interesting.
She's not directly connected with the business of the bank.
I've not done a deeper dive into this, but apparently one of the Rothschild does have is a rabid Zionist and does have links with Alan Dershowitz and the whole Epstein human trafficking scandal that Whitney Webb.
So the thing about all that is, the Rothschilds are, as I said before, British bankers. And being British bankers, they of course do business with the Bank of England. The Bank of England is one of those first quasi-state, quasi-independent, the original quasi-state, quasi-independent bank, which really isn't independent at all, because in the end, it's all the king's money. And the head of the Bank of England is just the king's accountant to make sure that the government isn't misspending the king's money. As best illustrated by the fact that no less a liberal paragon than John Locke told the government, no, you can't just mint more money to pay the Bank of England. You have to tax it out of people.
Fascinating, isn't it?
It is. But so central banks have been pushing austerity and quote unquote sound money policy since the first central bank.
Fascinating,
And the only purpose of a central bank is to tell states that they can't do all the things that are the only justification for a state existing, but don't benefit the liberal capitalists who control the levers of power in the modern state.
Exactly.
And this is from the beginning. The people in the Bank of England were some of the biggest supporters of the Liberal Party.
This that's fascinating.
Again, John Locke. John Locke was the first head honcho of the Bank of England.
I find very blood boiling when we talk about British politics is that the Labour Party was supposed to basically be an alternative to these two
Yes.
douchebag parties, the liberals, the conservatives. But basically, the Labor Party became a liberal party. I think actually, I think basically like when the Liberal Party kind of like plummeted after like World War II, all those liberals I think basically just like hijacked into the Labor Party,
Hey,
and then the Labor Party became
the nasty truth about neoliberalism is while Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher get all the blame, the two Jimmys, Carter and Callahan, really set the fucking table for them.
Woo! Truth bomb. That is true. No, that is very
Jimmy
very,
Carter
very
and
true.
Jimmy Carter and James Callahan. I shouldn't call him Jim. No, what the fuck? Jimmy Carter and Jimmy Callahan were absolutely Reagan Republicans before Reagan and Thatcher conservatives before Thatcher. They had this whole notion of appeasing.
Well, you also have to include Paul Volcker, who also
Paul Volcker was appointed
who interestingly enough, when the housing bubble, blew up and the banks, and the banking crisis came about, Paul Volcker literally became this rebranded left-leaning neo-Keynesian, even though the root of all evil really does actually start with him, Jimmy Carter, and again the Labor Party before the rise of Thatcher and Reagan. So I'm glad you brought that up. And then when we talk about Canada, yes, Brian Mulroney is often seen as the root of all evil. And people were protesting against privatization and were protesting against his austerity agenda. Those same people then went to sleep in the 1990s when it was Paul Martin and Cretson, who were even more vicious, may I add, than Brian Mulroney's entire tenure ever was.
And Pierre Trudeau and the other liberals who came before Brian Mulroney were not exactly doing a great job of taking care of the people and avoiding neoliberalism in the first place.
Exactly.
Every liberal since has been a complete Reagan and Thatcher disciple.
Oh, very much
Callahan disciple, if you prefer.
Well, very very much so. And then the other dark irony about all of that is the following, and it also doesn't get much coverage even amongst the best left-leaning press and organizations in Canada, is the following, is that Pierre Trudeau was ironically, the last liberal that was sort of left-leaning, because apparently Pierre Trudeau did not like John Turner, didn't like Cretson, didn't like Paul Martin, didn't like Stéphane Dion. Apparently, he did like all of them because he thought they were all too right-leaning and right-wing.
I mean, remember, he was buddies with Castro, though he was probably spying on him for CIA, but still, he was buddies with Castro.
Exactly. Exactly. And no, Justin Trudeau was not the love child of Castro. You get that bizarre thing that the dumbass,
which is a shame. It's such a great story, and he really does kind of look like Fidel, but it's not true.
Yeah, and it's an insult to Fidel.
If that story were true, it is less likely that Pierre and Fidel would have been friends, CIA or not.
Exactly.
There would have been a breakup somewhere.
But this is all very important, and I think it all ties back to something we said. Something I said the last time I was on your program with the fine journalist who's covering all the stuff in Latin America and the border issues or non-issues, as I like to say, is the following. We have to stop. I think the left really needs to learn this in all topics. The left, or people who call themselves left, need to stop conceding to right-wing arguments. The moment you do that, you open up a whole can of worms for just far-right reactionary politics. So when we talk about the deserving poor or the undeserving poor, that leads into welfare, into a system which should be helping people becoming the classist, ableist system it becomes. And when we talk about cuts to welfare to get people back into the workforce, who it really, of course, it hurts everybody. It hurts everybody. But who it really hurts is people who have disabilities.
Yes.
Okay. And we just completely, we don't think, and people don't think about that. People don't think about these issues because unless they have somebody who is disabled, people just don't think about those issues.
Think about,
and when politicians, they could be liberals, they could be social democrats, when they concede into these bullshit right-wing arguments instead of robustly challenging them, because they think, well, if we just throw a few people under the bus, it's okay. But no. It spirals into this inhumane system that we currently have, where, again, as you mentioned, people who have mental health problems, people who are very poor, would like to work, but can't because the jobs simply aren't there, and people who are disabled are being encouraged to just go kill yourselves.
And I want to
we have a doctor that's ready to do euthanasia for you.
And I want to call out another disability advocate that we lost recently, Alice Wong.
Yes.
Who, as she has said repeatedly before she passed, remember, think about all the disabled people in Gaza and the West Bank under Israeli rule, or Israeli attack, or Israeli terror. And how many more disabled people there are because of Israeli terror in those places. And how the war is impacting their abilities to survive. Disabled people are falling by the wayside right now in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
And rest in peace. Anything where we see this level of destruction and death and deliberate genocide, the people who get the worst of it are going to be kids and disabled people because they're the most vulnerable members of society.
Man, can you remember when the genocide started? That fucking Satan incarnate Netanyahu was saying, "Whoa, we gave the people of Gaza more than 24 hours to evacuate." Yeah.
When the genocide intensified, let's all remember that the whole reason October 7th happened is because Israel was already holding thousands of Palestinians prisoner for no reason. And the whole point of October 7th was not only to break out of the siege, but also to take prisoners that could be exchanged for those Palestinian prisoners, most of whom were, again, in prison for no reason under Israel's ridiculous administrative detention system.
Exactly.
Many of whom have kids and disabled dependents.
So that being said, I'm not as familiar with figures in the disability advocacy community and so forth. So for people who aren't too familiar with the work of Alice Wong, which is myself included,
she was a socialist and a revolutionary who really would be more than an advocate or an activist. She was someone who actively kept telling the truth no matter what. I would call her a revolutionary journalist. She did quite a lot of writing for what is now the late Teen Vogue. which was the best political coverage in the U.S., sadly, until they killed it.
Wow. And she stuck her neck out for Palestine. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, she was talking about very specifically about the fact that as bad as it is for disabled people in the US, it's worse for disabled people in Palestine. It's worse for disabled people on the border. It's worse for disabled people whose families are being kidnapped by ICE. It's worse for disabled people who are themselves being kidnapped by ICE. It's worse for disabled people who are in prison. It's worse for disabled people who are being shot by cops. All these things funnel into the issues of eugenics, because everything that is bad for Americans and other people around the world is especially bad for disabled people.
Well,
now I'm going to... Leslie, thank you for making it. Leslie missed it. When did they kill Teen Vogue, she asks. A few weeks ago now, just a couple weeks before Alice Wong died, I think. They killed Teen Vogue and then Alice Wong died. It's kind of synergistic, unfortunately. But it was a few weeks ago now that another evil super company, and let's blame the French this time, Condé Nast.
Yeah.
Decided they were going to lay off all the political writers and editors at Teen Vogue and fold Teen Vogue into the main Vogue magazine.
So basically back to business as usual, where it's just a boring fashion magazine.
Just a fashion magazine. No more separate teens fashion magazine. We want teens to buy the one with naked women on the front. I make that joke. Joke because
it's a good joke, actually.
Capitalism is bringing about exactly the circumstances that these religious conservatives claim to be opposed to, because that's where the money is. I mean, if you argued, should teens trying to follow fashion have to buy Vogue with this naked woman on the cover? Shouldn't they have their own teen magazine? No. And they shouldn't be allowed to buy Vogue. Teens should be illiterate by law until they're 21.
Interestingly enough, and actually, I have to have you on 1+1 to talk about this, because one of these days I actually do want to have a discussion on the legacy of Hugh Hefner, because I find it hilarious. The following, anyways, I find this hilarious, and it's the following. Now, I myself, if you were to ask me in a James Lipton questionnaire, Yuri, what turns you off? I would say the following: over-sexualization and over-titillation. It turns me off and so forth. And that being said, Playboy was completely softcore, and I really, really do not understand why feminists get so uppity about Playboy when it was softcore, and the naked ladies you see really not that much different than what you see in regular fashion magazines.
Because Playboy, even now without much nudity left, other than the cover and the centerfold, Playboy sells a leisure class lifestyle that can only be enjoyed by capitalist men. When you say the word playgirl, it does not have the same immediate visual sensory meaning as the word playboy.
Which is interesting of itself, because it shows you the kind of sexist double standard.
For those who do not understand the term playboy, The term comes from the journalism of the middle 20th century, 30s, 40s, 50s, where wealthy people who were heirs to the fortunes of people who did real work but did no visible work themselves and simply enjoyed life were referred to as wealthy playboys because they didn't work. They just played all the time. They didn't have any other, they didn't do anything but enjoy life and see to the charitable responsibilities of their family, which usually meant charity balls, which gave them an excuse to party more. So when you talk about all these superheroes, the reason they're all wealthy playboys is because that's the sort of person who doesn't have any day job or serious responsibilities other than the occasional charitable ball, who has both the time and the resources to dress up and fight crime.
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne, millionaire playboy. Tony Stark, millionaire playboy industrialist. Though you can't be both an industrialist and a playboy.
But I do have to emphasize this. Elon Musk is no real life Tony Stark. His cult followers like to think that he's a real life Iron Man, but no, he's pure evil incarnate.
Elon Musk is a real playboy, a worthless heir who lives entirely off investments, whose skill, if he has one, is a sort of vulgar corporate rating that amounts to understanding opportunism and the greed of others.
And what I love the most about libertarians like him and Donald Trump is none of them would have gone for if not for the government helping them out.
Well, I mean, the biggest donor to quote unquote healthcare freedom in the United States was a rich old fart named Charles Koch, who is also one of the biggest donors to both the Republican Party and also libertarian think tanks that work for both the Republican and the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
And so this rich guy who funds libertarians also funds Trump.
And sadly, those.
And Trump is the opposite of any sort of serious libertarian, I should say. The state is clamping down on everything he doesn't like as if he were a god king.
Well, in all bits, and interestingly enough, what was I going to say? Those on the left, when we talk about, ableism and the COVID denialism and so forth like that, I had to stop watching lots of left-leaning anti-imperialist media because of their COVID denialism and whatnot. Those people who, it's important. Democracy now.
Speaking of COVID denialism. Speaking of COVID denialism, Revolutionary Black Network is now out of sorts with Jimmy Dore.
Why is that?
Because he's too pro-cop for them now. Apparently, all their investment in being nice to COVID denialists because they were really libertarians who would sympathize with them on opposition to the police. No, Jimmy Dore and his audience love cops.
Fucking hell. No, and look, I bring this up. I bring this up in memory of Leslie, the following. Those same voices, the Jimmy Dores of the... And fuck it, look, I'm not going to be around the bush anymore. I'm just going to name names, so whatever. The Jimmy Dores of the world, the sort of unlimited hangout folks, Eva Bartlett, Ness Bealey, and what was it? Slow News Day, and also to a degree, Glenn Greenwald. It's interesting that none of them reported the following. Democracy Now!, however imperfect it is, but Democracy Now! Did a report, and the report showed that all of those anti-vaxxers and the anti-lockdown folks, even against minimal lockdowns, were all funded by yours truly, Koch brothers, and all those stupid far-right libertarian outlets. So
I have a question. I have a question for you, and then I'll try to segue a little towards the border and Venezuela and such. But
yeah,
ultimately, and I'm trying to get the train of thought I had lost back now. Here we go. Ultimately, the people in Leslie's orbit, I'm thinking of Katie Halper and her former relationship with Matt Taibbi, which was never in any way officially rebuked or revoked.
Yeah.
And a lot of defending of Matt Taibbi, who was, of course, a full-blown COVID denialist himself, who platformed some of the worst people.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Matt Taibbi specifically went out of his way to platform Brett Weinstein when he started his Substack. And Brett Weinstein is one of the worst people pretending to be sort of new left, who's this weird Koch-funded libertarian whose brother works for Peter Thiel.
I did not know that about Matt Taibbi. I know Taibbi has pivoted more and more to the fucking far right.
And Abby Martin. Abby Martin, of course, is sort of in the orbit of gray zone and their denialism, or has been in the past. And PSL as a party, which I know her husband is a member of. I don't know if Abby's a PSL member or not. I don't want to assume. But I know her husband is a PSL member, and PSL was very careful not to ever mention COVID really, except to try to use it to unite people against the ruling class in ways that were not exactly unwelcoming to anti-vax libertarian types, because they thought they had openings with anti-vax libertarian types. So I really kind of wonder, are Katie and Abby going to make a turn to serious reporting on disability justice and long COVID now that Leslie's passed? I don't remember them doing it while he was alive. I think that's a fair question.
Well, I can only hope. We encourage them to do it.
And these are people who I know consider themselves and Leslie to be good friends. And so when people say that they've lost contact with their friends and their family because of long COVID, some of the people who are giving their, I'm sure, genuinely heartfelt tributes to Leslie, I wonder how they were treating him privately. How were they talking about long COVID the way he would have wanted them to on their platforms? Will they talk about long COVID the way he would want them to on their platforms now? I think that's just a question for everybody to ask.
Yeah, because it's a mass silent killer, and it's not getting the attention it deserves, and it's not getting the attention it deserves because
and being silent about it.
Yeah,
being silent about it makes it more of a silent killer.
Yeah.
Because we could all be
Because
loud about it and it wouldn't be silent at all.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I'm glad you brought that up. And as you can see, even I have a hard time talking about it because I know other people on the left who were all COVID denialists, COVID denialists, COVID
Mm-hmm.
minimalists, whatever you want to call them. But they were that. They were on record. That I had. I even I. It got so bad, and I know even in my own family, we've had. It was a conversation some of us could not have with extended family members or friends because they all went cuckoo cuckoo about on COVID and the anti and the anti vax stuff. And right now, there are lots of people dying from long COVID.
Yes.
And if they're not dying, there are people who I think are just permanently disabled now because of long COVID.
Well, I want to talk about that because I want to talk about outcomes. Once you become disabled, your life expectancy drops because our system is not designed to help disabled people live. Even if they don't kill themselves, they still tend to die from having their issues neglected.
And that includes places that have the single payer healthcare system that Americans, those on the left, claim they want. But when they came to COVID, those very people who claim that they want single payer healthcare all of a sudden became libertarians overnight because
all the
my body,
arguments,
my choice when it comes to getting a vaccination or not.
all the arguments against public health are also arguments against public health care. And social health and social health care are important things. They should be part of what society provides for its members. But we don't seem to want to have to deal with the reality of what our responsibilities to members of our society are. And primarily that's because the rich see society as a means to their wealth and not much else. And they run the country. They're the landlord class is the quote unquote dictatorship of capital that Marx was talking about. They control our political parties, and our political parties can't do anything that doesn't fit the needs of the economic powerhouses that set our economic policy and plan our economy from their little Wall Street and Chamber of Commerce offices.
I have to ask this question then. Again, in memory of Leslie and many people who are dying from long COVID, are dying from institutional ableism and stuff like that. Is our society set up in such a way that people who do have people who do have disabilities, whether they're wheelchair bound, whether they have certain levels of autism and so forth, is the system the ableism set up in such a way that you don't have much contact with people who have with people who have those, because those are voices who I think we really could use on the left, but such is the system where they are so segregated and so forth that like I said, the ableism and the mass COVID denialism, minimalism that appeared on that appeared on the left was quite a fucking sight to behold.
I mean, we're getting to the point where everybody who can't rent their children out for child labor is going to be stuck working in prison.
Wow.
For landlords and not getting even the paycheck that they would get now. in a sort of return to that Victorian era where, able-bodied adults aren't permitted to work unless they're they have a very privileged class position. And adults who are not able-bodied will be forced to do work anyway in the prison system as sort of their price for survival, and will die sooner as a result.
Look, I mean, we have to talk about this seriously, because having a fucking ghoulish dickhead like RFK Jr., who was fucking propped up by people on the left, the anti-imperialist left, I don't even know what's left anymore. I mean, people so easily throw people under the bus. It's just not even funny anymore. It's grotesque. I mean, it's almost like
there's a competition.
By the way, people do this so easily. I I didn't want to bring this up, but I feel it's important to bring this up to make the comparison. So because I mean, we've been talking about England so much. So right now in England, there's efforts to start a new left party. Thank God. But this left party, your party, has been getting into endless squabbles. And one of the squabbles, which I find quite disturbing, is the following: Zara Sultana was interviewed by Nish Kumar, and he simply asked her the question: this new left party you're trying to form, is it going to be exclusive? Is it going to be a safe space for trans people and so forth? And she said that it would. She says, we do not want people who are socially conservative and who harbor any form of bigotry in our new left party. My response to that was, yay. The response, though, of other people who have bigger platforms than us, who have huge followings, and who fancy themselves as anti-imperialists and the best friends of Palestine and so forth, their response to that really showed the deeply ingrained transphobia, heteronormativity, which is a big fucking problem on the left.
Corbyn is so interested in building unity around Palestine specifically, considering that his most important issue, which is good. I don't want to blame him I don't want to say that that's bad. You definitely want your party to be on the same page about Palestine. But that's led to a sort of big tent for anyone opposed to Palestine policy. One of the people who's supposedly joining and is going to be important in forming things is a guy who's an independent but would align more with the Tories on 90% of things, but who happens to be really pro-Palestine.
Yeah.
And how can you build a left party around a capitalist who is 90% Tory, but just wants to see a Palestinian state because he figures he can sell them stuff?
This is a big problem. There is a really, really big problem on the left when it comes to ableism. And when it comes to ableism, big problem on the left.
Well, I mean,
has to be said. And then there is also
the religious,
and there still is a huge problem on the left when it comes to heteronormativity.
Well, the Christian influence.
People, and look. I've seen people. I won't say their names, but they're on my Facebook, and I saw in very real time people who claim that they have queer friends. People who claim that they're for queer liberation and so forth like that. And they were literally saying in real time, maybe we should park the trans issue in order to broaden the mass working class and so forth. And guys, that you are literally throwing people under the bus when you say fucking shit like that.
So much for working class solidarity. Throw out the working class trans people.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not like throwing people under the bus in order to save more people is something that you can ever stop doing once you start.
And look, and and look, I also find this quite hilarious. I find it hilarious that Jeremy Corbyn, who was the biggest fucking coward, who continuously, by the way, threw Palestine solidarity under the bus, threw his Jewish anti-Zionist friends under the bus. People are, and this coward. This is the person who supposedly is going to bring in a new era of leftism, and people want that guy to be the leader of that. And look, I'm sure, I know for a fact, Zara Sultana is probably not perfect on every issue, especially when it comes to anti-imperialism and stuff like that. But I just find it hilarious. A young millennial person of color. No, Jeremy Corbyn, he's our anointed Jedi master.
I had somebody,
even though he was a fucking coward when it came to Palestine all those years ago. The reason why anti-Palestinianism, by the way, is so normalized. The reason why the reason why you can be pro-genocide and have a career leg up is because the left, once upon a time, and still to this day, threw Palestinians under the bus. And Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, who's supposed to be on paper this great CV of anti-imperialism and social justice and so forth, he had the chance to really educate people on what anti-Zionism is, on Palestine and so forth, and he continuously threw Palestine.
A friend of mine, a pro-Palestinian Jewish American Marxist living in the UK, who sadly I have since lost touch with, and who I miss very much, once told me that the problem with the labor anti-Semitism investigation isn't that there isn't anti-Semitism in the Labor Party, or even that some of the people specifically accused of anti-Semitism weren't anti-Semitic. But the way she put it to me was, well, this is an anti-Semitic country. And Chris Williamson may not be the sort of person I would want to hang out with on my own time outside of the Labor Party because of some things he says or does, but he's got the right policy on Palestine, and he's not more anti-Semitic than the Tories.
I've had Chris Williamson on the program many times. Chris, I'm not endorsing that, but still. But look,
I'm just saying.
It's interesting that you brought that up, though, because Chris Williamson,
sadly, he was one of the people targeted and very specifically by the Labor Party in order to make an example of anti-Semites. And she said, basically, I'm using her language, he's as anti-Semitic as any other British person because this is a horribly anti-Semitic country. But it doesn't affect his policy the way it affects the policy of people who support Israel a little too much because they want all the Jews to go there. And so,
hosts a show on Press TV, all about Palestine. But I know for a fact, and I've seen it in real time, Chris wanting to throw trans people under the bus.
Oh yeah, no, I know. He was involved. He was involved.
And many people said the following about George Galloway, who, yes, is one of the best anti-imperialist voices, and also one of the voices when it comes to Palestine. But on other topics, I can tell you, George Galloway is very, very socially regressive.
George Galloway is very socially conservative, yes. And more than that, he is convinced that every white British worker his age feels exactly like he does.
Exactly.
Which I know for a fact isn't true because I correspond with the son of the late author of Harry's Last Stand.
But still, but Chris, I gotta tell you, it's just shocking to see in real time how much supposed leftists are willing to just throw people under the fucking bus, and it's
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 almost
hilarious.
like
It's
it's
I'll tell you, it's hilarious because you can easily convert somebody, especially from a marginalized group, to join a socialist movement. But it's almost as if they don't want to do that. They're really
it's almost
really keen in going to the socially regressive, intolerant, bigots, especially on ableism, especially a heteronormative person, so willing to make a big
it's
tent and
almost
embrace that.
it's almost like Ernst Thälmann was right, and social democracy is the moderate wing of Nazism.
I think we're really getting to that point. I'm not being
You see it
hyperbolic.
all the time. You see it
Yeah.
all the time. The liberals are the moderate wing of the capitalist system, which is inherently fascist in the sense that capitalism is about the maintenance of a small ruling class by society, and a hierarchical society is used to discipline the workers and keep the ruling class in charge.
And I think and look, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many times I've done a show about this. I know you've done many shows about this, where just because you're a leftist does not mean that you're not immune to recycling garbage sexism, garbage racism, garbage heteronormativity, and garbage ableism. This is where this is where we get this. This is where we get nonsense where people go. Look, somebody who's disabled who wants to join the workforce. That's wonderful, and we should do our efforts to make sure that happens. But
Yes.
That being said, if somebody cannot work because of their disability, and if somebody is very stricken with very severe mental health issues and cannot work, I don't see why we feel the need to continue to marginalize those people as opposed to just giving them the help they need.
Well, and
we're so obsessed with work culture. We get so incensed at the idea that if somebody is unable to work, they're to blame for it, and we continue to marginalize them, and marginalize them. And there's a big problem on the left when it comes to stuff like that. I know this from my own experience struggling with mental health illnesses. The kind of fucking neo-eugenics stuff that people say. If you just say to them like yes, I have severe, look, I have auditory processing disorder, I have dyscalculia, and then I have all this mental health problems. The responses you get from people is just classic 101 ableism, marginalization of people with mental health problems, and so forth. And it's always a version of you're to blame for your own misfortune.
Well, there's an assumption. There is an assumption based in the Calvinist idea of predestination that bad shit happens because people deserve bad shit, and that good shit happens because people deserve good shit. And it's completely divorced from the fact that the original idea of predestination was shit happens and it has nothing to do with whether you deserve it or not. But the idea that shit happens and it has nothing to do with whether you deserve it or not, which was supposed to be a reason for everyone to love and take care of each other, has been turned into this, well, shit happens and you can't do anything about it, so suck it up and go to work.
Well, and I think I'm no scholar on Hinduism. I only know about Hindu fundamentalists and their warped views when it comes to the caste system and so forth like that. But even when people use the expression "karma is a bitch," you're having bad things happen to you because karma is a bitch. Apparently, people have people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. That's not what karma means at all. Can you
No,
talk
it's
about
not.
that?
Well, but again, that ends up how karma is used in justification of the class system and the caste system in Hinduism. The justification of the caste system in Hinduism was something that Germans in the 1930s admired very much and wanted to copy. The RSS, which wants to bring the caste system back in a big way, is in power in India right now through their BJP party. Narendra Modi, who is one of the closest things to a true fascist, right up there with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, is in power in the so-called biggest democracy in the world.
with also the biggest inequality on top of that.
and how many people already have died in India during COVID because of Modi's policies that we aren't talking about? How many people have died in Palestine because of Israel's policies about COVID that we don't talk about? How many people have died here in the US because of COVID policies that we don't talk about? Now, let's remember that Alice and Leslie are personalized the deaths caused by COVID in another way, in that most of the people who are dying of COVID aren't white and aren't wealthy. And while wealthy people do get and die of long COVID, that's not where the attention is. That's not what they're most scared of right now. And all the rest of the ableism in society really, really helps the wealthy harm people who aren't disabled too. And that sort of willingness to throw disabled people under the bus feeds into a willingness to throw everybody else under the bus. And soon there's nobody you're not willing to throw under the bus. Because remember, throwing disabled people under the bus always includes throwing disabled friends or family like Leslie or Alice under the bus in some level. And if you're willing to throw your friends or family under the bus because of their disability, who won't you throw under the bus?
And like I said, I saw in real and again, I saw in real time when when one of these fake independents who are supposedly left-leaning and so forth, but they're only really good on the one issue, which is Palestine. Not to minimize that at all. It's good. I like anybody that's good on Palestine. But for fuck's sakes, guys, intersectionality. I know people are scared of that. Identity politics, wokeism, but for fuck's sakes, man.
Well, that's the thing. You
had people. I saw people who claim to have queer friends go, we should park the trans issue under the bus.
So the problem is if we really are going to embrace a movement towards biopolitics to fight against this necropolitics movement that is killing us all, then the very first rule has to be you don't throw anyone under the bus. We're trying to keep as many people alive as possible.
Yeah, sorry, something got on my screen. I can't get rid of it. I hope it's not too distracting for people. Actually, can you tell? Damn it!
It's just a little bit of luminosity in the corner. I'm going to wrap up in a sec anyway. I think I wanted to cover more.
But no, look, there is a big problem on the left. And we have to talk about it more.
It's not even just on the left. This is everywhere. This is a core problem with Western society. This is part of what we are trying to overthrow.
Yeah. And look, we got to do better because, look, I mean, in a nutshell, we have to do much better. And I think it's up to us however big or small our audience is, to keep these topics alive. Because, I mean, look, the moment I don't get how people just don't realize this, but the moment you throw anybody under the bus and you minimize their grievances and so forth, it's that very thing which gets us to this unjust system that is capitalism.
Yes.
This and that is the real reason. I think that is the real reason why there is sadly so much sectarianism on the left,
capitalism,
and why some people don't want to join parties because for exactly those reasons.
Well, so, and I'm going to go way back.
For example, you cannot, you cannot if you're a white, able-bodied, gender-conformist Marxist, you cannot complain. Why don't we have more people of color joining our movements? if you fucking engage in racism and stuff like that, and if you're already saying, well, you guys are too much on the identity politics and stuff like that, and yet you're so willing to link up arms with fucking libertarian douchebags and so forth, then you can't blame people for not wanting to join your movements.
I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. We have to teach people what eugenics looks like in policy and in culture. It's a long fight in a country that has been so propagandized to distrust education. Now, this is exactly true, because we have all this propaganda about how politics shouldn't be in the classroom and education should be apolitical and not indoctrinate children into any one idea. But our schools indoctrinate people into liberal capitalism.
Yeah.
And when people complain about liberal capitalism, they're complaining about a school system that's designed to indoctrinate people into liberal capitalism in order to establish certain things as normal. Going to school is established as normal so that going to work is established as normal. Being submissive to teachers' authority is normal so that being submissive to the boss's authority and the landlord's authority is normal. You have all this stuff in school that's designed to indoctrinate kids to be good workers. And they're worried about anything that would indoctrinate people to make things better for each other.
Which is funny enough. This is why even fucking sex education is so terrible, even when it is put into practice.
Because it has
the
to
moment. Because the moment. By the way, a lot of the people who are against gender ideology being taught in schools, having interviewed a trans woman who has worked her whole life in education unions, she said to me the following, in response to, George Galloway's bigoted comments and others on the left who, hate trans people and so forth. She said the following. She says, the only thing schools even teach in health classes is the following: that there are people who are trans, there are people who are non-binary, and there are people who are gay. And guys, here's the human anatomy, and here's how man and woman makes babies. And that's it. And that's it. They're not even being taught about how they can actually change their genders. They're not even taught about asexuality or anything like that. So when the George Galloways of the world and other leftists who keep complaining about fucking wokeism and critical race theories, they don't know what they're talking about. But what they are showing is how bigoted they are, and their bigoted blind spots.
No, and I agree. And I think the real danger of what some people call Stalinism is not some manufactured Western propaganda, but rather the bureaucratic tendency to want to compromise with liberalism in order to gain time for socialism.
Yeah.
And all of Stalin's compromises with liberalism did nothing to stop the Soviet Union from being invaded by Hitler.
It's actually it is very interesting that she brought that up, because apparently Lenin, who I'm pretty sure had his heteronormative blind spots and also his sexist blind spots, but he decriminalized same-sex relations. Stalin immediately reintroduced them,
He
but none of
also
that changed.
recriminalized abortion and reinstated the state's preference for married couples. These were all parts of Stalin's compromises to get the Russian Orthodox Patriarch to come back to Moscow, and I don't think he still did.
Exactly. Exactly. And it still didn't. And it still didn't minimize.
Stalin, who went to preschool,
in no way it minimized Hitler wanting Russia to be the living space for greater Germany.
And Stalin wanting to be in, Stalin having gone to priest school meant Stalin sort of wanted the church to legitimize him because he knew what that would mean to religious Russians. And so he was willing to make a lot of liberal sacrifices to get the church to give him a legitimacy that Lenin never would have wanted in the first place.
Do we have to close now?
Now is a good time, I think. I'd wanted to segue more into the border and killing people in Latin America, but I think that's going to have to be its own show too.
Yeah. Well, in closing, in memory of Leslie, what do you think leftists going forward need to do? What should we be doing more, going forward and honoring his memory, his legacy? I think, in short, we do have to tackle ableism more. We do have to cover, I think, ableism more. It is because, as I said in an episode all about Latin America, the moment we concede to stupid far-right arguments, we've already lost, basically.
Yes. And that's what the Democrats do. The whole purpose of the liberal Democratic Party establishment, or the liberal establishment the labor establishment now in the UK, the liberal establishment in Canada, the whole purpose of all of this, it's the establishment. They're in the job of giving stuff up for the people to the landlord and the boss in order to maintain their share of power. They're in the throwing us under the bus business. We can't, if we're angry at politicians for throwing us under the bus, we certainly can't start throwing each other under the bus for the same reasons politicians are throwing people under the bus.
Exactly.
And I think that's a good place for us to stop.
Yeah, rest in peace
to thoughts?
Rest in peace to Leslie and Alice Wong, and I will certainly try to do my part in covering more the topic, the topic of ableism, and as a leftist, I believe just in basic compassion 101. I think socialism is all about being compassionate and so forth. And so you will never ever see me engaging in sexism, ableism, transphobia or anything like that, because I just think, like, as socialists, as leftists, we need to, it's not just about, revolution and smashing this grotesque system that is capitalism, which I just call institutional classism, but it's also, yeah, we have to be socially liberal, we have to be tolerant, and the moment we make these categories of worthy poor and unworthy poor, that's just recycling. Anyways, I cannot normalize the unthinkable like that, and so I just think, like, in honor of Leslie's memories and other people, we have to be more robust about it, and if that means falling out with folks, okay, by all means, fall out with them.
To get a little jazzy with Oscar Wilde, everything is about eugenics, except eugenics. Eugenics is about maximizing quarterly profits.
Yeah.
On that note, I hope everybody has a great week. Everything goes well. Yuri and I will be back next week to talk about mental health, more ableism, and and then the word goes out of my head again. Because yes, conservatorships for disabled people. There'll be some addiction talk too. So please join us next week if you can. I hope to be on time. And thank you for your patience until I could get back in the air. Leslie, Jamar, thanks for joining us in the chat today. I hope you both have a great week. And everybody, until next week, we'll tweet at you.